He's a man under pressure, already immersed in scandals. The Italian Prime Minister suffers heavy election defeats in both his stronghold of Milan and Naples. So, is Silvio Berlusconi's reign nearing its end? Or can he stage another comeback to cling on to power? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Felicity Barr. Silvio Berlusconi's People of Freedom Party, the centre-right movement that he founded in 2009, suffered an embarrassing defeat in local elections on Monday. Those losses coincided with the resumption of Berlusconi's trial, where he stands accused of abuse of power and sex with an underage girl. Tanya Page has more.
Keep calm and carry on. The embattled Italian Prime Minister, on a trip to Romania, insists he is holding his nerve in the face of shattering election losses at home and increasingly hostile public opinion. After a humiliating defeat in his home city of Milan and another big election blow in Naples, the morning papers reflected the view on the street that it was time for the flamboyant leader to go.
Italy is really on its knees. It is not that the alternative is so much better, but anything is better than Berlusconi.
I'm really happy, particularly for Naples. I really hope this will change things and there will be a rebirth for the city.
Great. It was time the boss moved aside. Like this, we can shake the country up a bit and change things for the workers, the students and the poorer families.
Local election defeats are not his only problem. His trial on charges that he paid for sex with an underage teenager continues on Tuesday. She's known as Ruby Heartstealer, and Berlusconi is accused of trying to cover up the scandal by abusing his influence. Another 3 court cases, all related to his business empire, are also underway. He denies all the charges, but his hold on power is looking increasingly shaky.
Berlusconi has to consolidate his alliance. His coalition has been greatly weakened. His party and the Northern League have already started fighting among each other, and he has to maintain the coalition, he says, for the next 2 years. I somehow doubt it.
Berlusconi is accused of running an overtly racist campaign in the latest round of elections and turning them into a virtual referendum on his private life and government. A tactic that's backfired with disastrous results. Tanya Page, Al Jazeera.
So then, what is the future for Berlusconi? Well, I'm joined now by our 3 guests. In Rome is Nucccia Bianchini, editor at the foreign desk for the Italian news agency Agenzia Giornalistica Italia. From Aberdeen, Andrea Teti, international relations lecturer at the University of Aberdeen. And back in Rome, James Walston, professor of international relations at the American University. James comments regularly on Italian politics, and you probably saw he was just featured in our report. James, if I could start with you, were these defeats expected, or did they come as something of a shock?
Oh, they came very much as a shock, at least the first round defeat, because Italian elections have 2 rounds to them, and if you don't win an absolute majority in the first, you go to a runoff 2 weeks later. And the first round were a serious shock and a wake-up call for Berlusconi and the People of Freedom, because he lost, his person lost in Milan, his mayor, the outgoing mayor lost in Milan, and his man in Naples did a very poor showing against the 2 left-wing candidates. So it was a very serious blow then, and all these results were confirmed and made even worse with the results, the final results which we've just got.
Yes, Nucccia Bianchini, it was very humiliating for Berlusconi to lose in Milan, especially. It's the financial heartland and his baseland, isn't it? It's his base of power. How embarrassing is this for the Prime Minister?
It's hard to predict the future. Berlusconi lost the election. He admitted the losses, but he had already lost in the past, and he returned to the government. Yesterday he said, well, we have to remain calm and to move forward. and today he added, every time I have sat back, I triple my forces. It was a symbolic defeat, that is certain, but it's hard to say if it will bring down the government. The truth is, I think, that neither the coalition of government, neither the opposition are ready for the elections.
Andrea Teti, Berlusconi clearly has no intention of resigning whatsoever. He is a fighter, he is a comeback king. But what about his party? What are they going to do? Because clearly he looks like, at the moment, something of a liability, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with his People of Freedom Party is that actually this is a very personalistic creation. It's centred around him, and there isn't a hell of a lot of political depth to it. Really, what is holding the coalition together is the Lega Nord, his ally on the right, which is a sort of separatist party in the north. And this is going to be the real litmus test over the next few days to see what exactly the Lega Nord is going to do. Are they going to remain within the alliance? Highly likely. What kind of price are they going to exact from Berlusconi to remain and to prop up the government?
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, the Northern League is notoriously a bit fickle about what it wants to do as regards Berlusconi. Do you really think they're going to continue backing him?
We need to distinguish the fickleness of public pronouncements as opposed to the continuity in policy. So quite often when there are scandals or problems, electoral defeats such as these ones, the Northern League makes noises about a need for change, the possibility of breaking with the alliance, of going it alone, and so on. But most of the time until now, aside from the very first government that they were in with Berlusconi, they have ended up staying within the alliance with Berlusconi. What they have done is they've exacted a very dear price in terms of for their continued political allegiance. Even last week we heard Berlusconi himself talking about decentering some ministries, moving them up to Milan, in what was widely thought to be a kind of pre-electoral negotiation with the Lega Nord after the first round of embarrassing results.
James Walston, let's continue to talk a little bit about the Northern League and its effect on politics and the government in Italy. It is, of course, a hard right group, much more to the right than Berlusconi.
Well, it is and it isn't. They have both been using very strong racist language, particularly in Milan, where there was a lot of extremely offensive language used in the last week in an attempt to energize their voters. They've been very clever over the last 20 years in distinguishing the way in which they talk to their base at home and the way they talk to government here in Rome. And they play good cop, bad cop extremely well, with the leader, Umberto Bossi, playing the bad cop and being very crude and coarse in his pronouncements, and Moroni, the Minister of the Interior, being much more subtle. So they are many things, and they have over the last, again, as Andrea said, they have, except for 1994, they've huffed and they've puffed, but they've never blown the house down. And they are going to huff and puff now, but they probably won't blow it down immediately.
Well, it's interesting, Nucccia Bianchini. Berlusconi had been using scare tactics in Milan. Some might say racist scare tactics. He talked about Milan becoming a gypsy town if it went further left, a town with a mosque on every street corner. Do you think Berlusconi might now regret having used those sort of tactics? Do you think they backfired on him?
It's hard to say. The commentators today says that the electorate wants expresses a change of wind, and maybe they some of them didn't like that kind of expressions of Berlusconi, but it's hard to say if it determined the results.
Andrea Teti, were these elections, do you believe, effectively a referendum on Berlusconi about how the Italian people feel about their long-serving Prime Minister?
They were, but they were also much more than that. I mean, if you look at the candidates who won, particularly in Naples and Milan, they are, of course, centre-left candidates, but they are candidates who were notably opposed by the main Partito Democratico opposition party. Pisapia was elected through their primary selection process against the candidate that was chosen by the party elite, and Luigi De Magistris is a member of the Italia dei Valori party, who was not endorsed before the elections by the Partito Democratico. So this is definitely a vote against Berlusconi and his policies, and the way that he's been running Italy for most of the last 17 years. But it's also a vote against the way that politics is done in Italy by the centre-left as well.
James Walston, was it also a vote against Berlusconi, the personality? Everybody knows, of course, that he's had all these scandals over the years. There's also the talk about the fact he's had facelifts, he's had hair transplants. He's seen out to the outside world something of an embarrassment to Italy. But in the past, Italians have seemed to love him. They appreciate his sort of flamboyant ways.
Indeed they have, and it's worth remembering that these were local elections, that there were 6 million Italians voting on Sunday and Monday, which is a small proportion of the total. So it is not the end of the road yet for Berlusconi. It's a very serious blow. And from what we've seen of both these campaigns in Naples and Milan and the other ones, the Italians who were voting were not voting about whether they liked Berlusconi's new hairstyle and his hairpiece or his facelift, or who he was going to bed with, or even what sort of corruption he's been accused of. They were voting about the lack of progress in the economy, about the fact that many of them their salaries don't get them to the end of the month, they're out of work, their children have no prospects. These are much more serious and much more down-to-earth issues than Berlusconi's sex life or his corruption life.
Nucccia Bianchini, do you agree with that? This was more about the economy than it was about the personality of Silvio Berlusconi. I mean, outside Italy, many people would say, why have the Italians kept electing this man when he's touched by so many scandals? But they haven't been that bothered about it in the past, have they?
Berlusconi is a self-made man, and the Italian loves this kind of man. And but he lost in Milan, that is the hub of his business empire. So maybe, as some commentator says, there is a answer of changing, but he has also a very strong personality, so we have to wait to predict the future.
Yes, Andrea Teti, he has a strong personality. There have been plenty of scandals around him. In some ways, do people believe that the scandals have distracted him from the job of being Prime Minister, and that's been part of the problem that Italy has faced over the last couple of years?
Of course, that depends who you ask. I mean, if you ask plenty of people on the left who believe that, but there are, importantly, quite a lot of people on the right who also believe that. I think a lot of the support that he got initially when he got into politics came from people who genuinely believed that he would enact liberal policies, enforce the rule of law and so on. But he really hasn't done that. So that constituency is as irked as their counterparts on the left.
Andrea, is part of the problem for Berlusconi's party that he is the party and that there are no alternatives in waiting? Is there going to be any pressure from inside his party, do you think, now?
Well, that's difficult to tell, but I suspect not, because a lot of people inside the party owe their position to him. And the same goes for the people in his party as does for the Lega Nord. The Lega Nord know that they need Berlusconi in government. They may be capable of making an alliance with a left-wing or centre-left government. But even more so inside the party, there are a lot of people who Berlusconi himself brought into politics, a lot of people who he owes favours to. So that kind of counts against a disappearance or internal dismemberment of the party. Having said that, quite a lot of people have been voicing more or less privately their discontent. Even Nicole Minetti, who was notoriously appointed by Berlusconi, last week said that she may have second thoughts, denied ever being his dental hygienist, which was apparently the beginning of her career.
James Walston, is the left or the centre-left actually seen as a viable alternative to Silvio Berlusconi and his coalition government?
At the moment, they aren't. What they will have to do, maybe going on the wave of these victories, is to find a candidate that they can all support, find programs which they can get behind, and try and repeat the sort of victory which they achieved in Naples and Milan and Cagliari and Trieste, in other places as well. But they suffer from the chronic division which they've had and which cost them their government in 2008 and made them very weak before that. So they are still not a viable alternative, unfortunately, for Italy, where a good two-party system would make the whole country much healthier.
How much of that is to do... Apologies for interrupting. I was going to say, how much is the fact that the left is not seen as a viable alternative, how much is that down to the fact that in the past, of course, the left had links to the Communist Party? Is that still in the minds of the Italian voters?
I don't think so, because the Communist Party was a very moderate Communist Party. It was extremely respectable. By the end of its life in the 1980s, it was a lot less radical than Michael Foot's Labour Party in the early 80s, for example. So it's not, except for a very few older, visceral anti-communists, that is not the red flag doesn't have the same effect as it used to. But the divisions do weaken any party, and they have shown their divisions. They've shown an inability to renew themselves either in programs or in individuals, and they, in many ways, have supported Berlusconi. They haven't dealt with his conflict of interest in 20 years. They haven't dealt with a whole lot of major issues. So Berlusconi has in the past been very happy with the sort of opposition which he's been provided with, and he's managed to divide them and keep his own people united. But there is some talk within the centre-right about succession. Berlusconi has put forward a couple of possible successors, and whether the League continues to support him, they will certainly up the price.
Nucccia Bianchini, also in Rome. I mean, why does Berlusconi want to hold on to power? Why does he keep going? He's an elderly man. He's in his mid-70s. He's had power. He's had fame. He's got the money. I think his personal and family fortune is worth something like $9 billion. What keeps him going?
It's difficult to say. Berlusconi has lost in the power in the past the government and regained the control again. So he has a strong personalities.
Do you think
it's difficult to say if he is able to surpass, to win this defect?
Let's move over to Andrea Teti. Assuming that Berlusconi manages to survive this latest crisis, what is he going to do, do you think? What's the government going to do to try and win back some popularity among the Italian people? Because clearly he's going to think he's got to do something.
Well, his strategy has always been to play the populist card towards the general public, but at a political level, he has always sought to cut a deal with his counterparts, in this case primarily the Lega Nord. But I would like to come back to what was being said before. I think one of the key reasons for which Berlusconi came into politics in the first place and has stayed in politics and will try to hold on to political power is that he is simply subjected to so many trials. So there are so many allegations of him breaking the law, and the sexual scandals are just the surface of all of that. That he needs to stay in power in order to make sure that laws are not changed in ways that would affect his trials negatively. We've seen him change the law several times in the past in order to affect with the effect of changing the balance inside his the trials that he was being subjected to. So I think that is the real reason why he's going to stay in power, as well as the will to be in the public eye.
Yeah, James Walston, let's talk a little bit more about these court cases that are famed around the world. Berlusconi himself believes that he's made about 2,500 court appearances over the last 20 years in 106 trials. He also says that he is being victimised by left-wing legal authorities. Is there any truth in those statements, do you think?
He has had something like 16 or 17 accusations, of which some of them have been dismissed wholly, but the ones which have been dismissed because the crime was changed. He has changed the law in order to reduce penalties, and the statute of limitations has let him off. He has been acquitted on other halfway measures. So he has not been acquitted fully. He has not been found not guilty in many trials because of the statute, above all because of the statute of limitations. He's been able to delay or change the law. He has 4 outstanding cases, 3 of which are corruption cases, 2 dealing with slush funds abroad, 1 dealing with the bribery of the English lawyer David Mills, and the 4th one being the Ruby case. And some of these will go on. The Mills case will almost certainly stop at the beginning of next year for the statute of limitations, so he won't be convicted on that. But he has done an awful lot of things which are illegal but are no longer punishable, or are unexplained, starting right at the beginning in the 1970s, where the money which he used for his first investments came from an unexplained source. There are allegations that this was mafia, and some of these allegations could continue and come into real prosecution over the next few years. So he does need to stay in power in order to avoid actually being convicted.
I'd like to put all 3 of you on the spot, starting with Nucccia Bianchini. Nucccia, do you think that Berlusconi and his government can survive the next 2 years until elections are due to be called?
I think yes. So the Northern League needs the federal reform. It's part of its political party. It's a constitutional part of his ideologic program. So I think that Bossi will continue to support Berlusconi, and
that does sound like a yes from Nucccia. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I want to ask the same question to Andrea Teti. Quite briefly, Andrea, do you think he can survive for another 2 years?
It's definitely possible. The problem is how much havoc he'll wreak with the economy, for example, and the political system in the meantime.
And James Walston, briefly again, if you can, do you think he will survive?
It all depends on whether the League think that they're better off with him or without him. And my guess is that it will probably survive until spring next year, but I think it's unlikely to survive for its full term.
All right, thanks to all my guests. That was James Walston and Nucccia Bianchini in Rome and Andrea Teti in Aberdeen. And thank you so much for watching this edition of Inside Story. As ever, we welcome your comments and suggestions, so please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But for now, it's goodbye.